So the individuals need to know what success looks like, Bartek, because if they don't know what success looks like, then how can they take their individual measures in order to achieve that?
Do you see any major differences in how players behave in terms of player acquisition, player retention? Are there any major differences that you could point out between Africa, West Europe, North America, South America, like anything in particular? Hi, welcome everybody to another episode of CEOpen Mic. Today we're hosting Martin Collins, BDO of Soft2Bet, the guy who's so busy that we had to wait till his holidays to take the recording. Hi Martin, nice to have you.
Hey Bartek, thanks for having me. It seems like that sometimes, that the only time I can get a minute is when I'm off. But I'm glad to have found a couple of hours to sit down with you.
Glad to have you. Let's jump into it. So your story, as far as I stalked you on LinkedIn, your personal story is that you studied politics. You were working in recruitment most or big part of your life. Then you jumped into iGaming and you jumped into sales positions. And right now you're Chief Business Development Officer. How does it happen? I mean, how does the guy from politics to recruitment to iGaming to sales to business development, how is it possible to do so many things and be so successful in it?
It's not actually that big a jump from each that you might imagine it to be. After 4 years of studying politics, if anybody continues in politics after studying 4 years of politics, they're probably a career politician. I realised that probably it wasn't for me. I can't lie, I'm a really bad liar, Bartek.
Well,
But politics definitely wasn't for me. But what I did realise is that actually I was a good people person. And I decided that I wanted to move to London from Glasgow, because I was studying in Glasgow at the time. And I had lots of different opportunities in London. The economy was thriving at the start of the noughties, and I ended up getting involved with a recruitment business. Now, I just want to clarify something here. If anybody tells you that recruitment isn't sales, then they're not doing recruitment properly. It is sales.
Isn't it
sales.
Recruitment? I've heard the definition of recruitment that this is sales done backwards. That you're actually selling the company to the employees, right?
Yep, you're selling the company to the employee, and you're selling the employee to the company. So it goes both ways actually, Bartek. So yeah, any good recruiter, I've never seen a good recruiter who can't do sales. So that's the first thing. And I was always very much a detail orientated guy. So some sales are transactional, some sales are medium, some are more detailed, and you get into the nitty gritty of the scenario. I was always the latter there. So as a consequence, when I started moving towards more complex scenarios, it was a little bit easier for me, because I always sort of, even in simpler scenarios, like I worked in the construction industry prior to the betting industry. Even then, I was looking at the more complex sales, the ones that could actually shift the dial materially. I always wanted to make nice money for the company I worked with, and obviously for me as well. So that was always a big motivator. But yeah, that's the point. Recruitment is sales, and there's no difference.
But where is iGaming in all that? Were you a player? Did you bet yourself? How does it work?
So I was always since I was 18, I was always interested in gambling. It's like in the west of Scotland, it's sort of ingrained into you, Bartek. I remember when I was a kid and it being like Grand National Day, and my grandfather coming to my house in the morning and taking our bets, and then going to the bookmakers and putting the bets on. So this is part of the culture. And then, I mentioned that I worked in the construction industry. In all honesty, I didn't really enjoy it very much. It was a little bit boring for my liking. And a guy by the name of David Copeland came to me and he said, "Okay, you're a recruiter. You like betting. How would you like to combine them both?" And I actually liked the job of recruitment. I really enjoyed it. But now I could combine it with an industry that I really sort of felt at home with. And I joined betting jobs in February 2006. So when I say that, it makes me feel old now. But yeah, there was only two recruitment companies in the industry at the time, and both of them still exist now, which is no mean feat, believe me. And yeah, and that's where I started within the gaming industry. if you look at the people that were recruiters at that time, you'll see a lot of them have moved into other areas, whether it be leading sales teams, leading businesses, starting their own businesses. There was a lot of success come out of that early period of recruitment, and many of them are still in the industry now, doing
Mhm.
very well in other areas. So I don't think I'm unique, but I think it was a good recruitment at that point was a very good bedding within the industry in order to take your career forward if you wanted to.
Right, right. But to make it even more, I mean, obviously it all makes sense, but to make it more complicated, in the meantime, you moved from you said Glasgow to London, but right now you're on holidays in Scotland, but on a daily basis you live in Malta, right?
I do, yeah. I moved there 15 and a half years ago
All right.
now.
So was the fact that you moved there in any way connected to the business that you said, oh my god, if I want to be in a gaming business, I need to be in Malta because this is where everything happens, or is it just a coincidence?
Somewhere in between, I always find the right answer is always somewhere in between. So in 2003, I went on holiday with my now wife, and we actually really liked Malta. Malta's like Marmite, Bartek. You either love it or you hate it. And I fall on the love it side of Malta. And we always said that it would be a nice place to live. Now, I'd been working with betting jobs for 3 years, and we discussed the possibility of opening an office in
Mhm.
Malta. In fact, one of my colleagues had gone out a year earlier and sort of got the lay of the land, created the entities and everything required in order to run a business there. And I moved out there with my wife and my 1 year old son. So, yeah, that was 15 and a half years ago. What was the thinking behind it? The thinking behind it was we could see that Malta was definitely, at that particular time, taking over from Gibraltar. Gibraltar had been the sort of core epicenter of gaming at that
Mhm.
particular time. But Malta was taking over, and a lot of new people were moving there. So that, and not just in terms of having entities again, having entire operations. You know, this was the time when Betson was really starting to ramp up from like 200, 300 people up to 500, 600 people. So from a recruitment perspective, it made a lot of sense. There was a lot of businesses coming in. There was regulation hitting. You know, Italy started to regulate around about that time as well. So there was a lot of movement going on, and Malta was definitely at the centre of that. So that was one of the decisions behind going there.
And
Yeah.
let's fast forward to today. From what I hear nowadays from lots of people who've been living in Malta, and I mean from the iGaming business, some of them are moving away from Malta, getting back to wherever in Europe they come from. Some of them are like pushing the
Mhm.
business entities outside of Malta because the main reasoning behind it, I mean, most often what I hear is that they say that the market is so crowded right now that basically the very same like bunch of companies is struggling to get the very same employees, and the employee retention, if that's even the term, uh, you can expect that the employee you're gonna have on Malta gonna be with the company for a year, 2 years tops, which makes it super difficult to build any kind of
Mhm.
company culture, to build any kind of lasting entities. Would you agree with that?
So there's definitely a challenge for sure. Okay, so the volume of people against the volume of jobs, there's probably more roles than there are people in Malta at the moment. That doesn't mean that you can't relocate, although it's even become a challenge for people from the UK post Brexit to relocate to Malta. But I want to take one of your points there and just challenge it a little bit. For during COVID, for sure, a lot of people moved back. But what I'm now seeing is a reverse migration back to Malta again, because a lot of people maybe lived in Malta for say 4 or 5 years. They go back home and they actually miss elements of Malta. That I mean, life is pretty easy in Malta. The weather's fantastic. People are friendly. Everybody speaks
Mm-hmm.
English. You know, there's advantages there. And they thought when they went home 5 years later that maybe things at home would be much better. But things have changed in mainland Europe. Believe me, you know, there's a lot of things that have happened over the last 5, 6 years. So I'm seeing people that have came, gone back, and are coming back again. So there's that element to consider too. But overall, for sure, the cost and the talent pool it's not directly there within Malta itself. So there's a challenge. However, just because there's a challenge doesn't mean it can't happen. to give you an idea, I joined Soft2Bet in October, and in Malta we had 65 employees. We're now up to 150, and we're very much an office focused environment. We want people to come into the office and build that culture, particularly from a commercial perspective. It makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense because I've, I've, I've managed remote, I've managed obviously office based teams, and to have just people around you and understand how they're positioning things and how they're looking at the challenges that they're facing on a day to day basis. If you have somebody that's facing the same challenges as you next to your own desk and you speak to them every day, you get to where you want to get to much
Mhm.
faster. So so yeah, we're building that sort of culture. It's very different to the norm at the moment, for sure. But it's possible. So it is possible. So there are for sure challenges, Bartek, but not challenges that can't be overcome.
All right. Well, you're talking to the guy because I manage my own company. I manage my own teams. What COVID forced us to do was that the remote work was a overnight that became a standard, right? I mean, nowadays our office in Warsaw is kind of empty, and before COVID, it was like fully packed, and we're actually looking for a new office space to to handle it somehow. And you say you can overcome it. I mean, you can overcome the fact that people prefer to work remotely. Are there any tricks you could share with us? Like, for instance, these kind of positions you should hire in house in the office in Malta, and the other ones are okay to be remote from wherever in Europe or Asia or whatever. Do you have any rules like that?
Yeah. Right. So the thing, I think the first thing to understand from my perspective, my subjective
Mm.
perspective, right, is that um, the gimmicks that you might see with the big established .com businesses like Google and Meta and TikTok and all of these guys, they have the big canteens, they have the ping pong tables, they have the PlayStations in the corner, and you know what? That's nice, but it's a nice to have. It's actually not what um, is going to keep an employee with you for a longer period of time. And the number that I always have in my head for a good attrition rate is normally around about 3 years, because that allows the person to come on board, get themselves established, consider things given the experience they've had previously, and then start to action it. So 36 months is probably a good time in order to do that. If you're leaving before that, you've not had the impact the company imagined that you would have. And as an individual, the question is, have you learned as much as you should have from that position? So the way that I look at it is that these things are gimmicky, but we do want to create a win-win scenario where the individual can grow, but the company can utilize their experience and their approach. And I think my personal feeling on the matter is that not many companies actually provide a plan for that individual to grow. So what we do is we utilize competency matrix for every position that we have. So we look at the different levels. Okay, we look at the different skills that is needed within that role, and we gauge the individual on the basis of what they're doing on a day to day basis. We understand the direction they want to go in, because they might not necessarily want to go into a management position. They might want to be an individual contributor. They might want to take a step into another department and do something entirely different. But everything is data focused, Bartek. We use the data in order to help them understand what steps they need to take in order to go in the direction that they want to go in. And once you go through that process and you stand by it and you're very empirical and you're very straightforward and you deliver the message, I think people then realize that you're investing in them for a longer period of time. And as a consequence, your attrition rate goes up. So it's not about the gimmicks, it's more about providing a platform for the individuals to grow, from my perspective.
Yeah, that's one of the things. We're gonna get to the point where I'm gonna ask you about the biggest aha moments. But one of the biggest aha moments for me was to learn that paying people a decent salary is just not enough. You have to give them the way to grow and the way to to become somebody they want to become. and that's the only way
Yeah,
to keep the people with you for years, right?
exactly. One of the funny things about Soft2Bet actually. Now, I tell this story a lot because when I move to a company, I always want to have a
Mm-hmm.
purpose as
Mm-hmm.
an individual. What is my purpose? Is it just to go and make loads of money? Okay, that's nice if we can do that, right? But actually, what's the reason for doing this? And within the gaming industry, that's more difficult than most
Mm-hmm.
industries, as I'm sure you can appreciate. But just before I started, I went on a trip to Dubai with the whole business. They have a yearly retreat. And our COO, Oksana, she did a speech and she spoke about the migration of the Ukrainian business as it was at the
Mm-hmm.
time during the beginnings of the
Yeah.
war in Ukraine to
Mm-hmm.
Cyprus, and how they took 400 people and they uprooted them, their pets, their cats, their dogs. There was a horse as well, apparently. All their families, and shifted them all back down to Cyprus from
Mm-hmm.
Ukraine. Now, for me, if that's not a purpose, then nothing really is. It's like essentially what we've done is we've taken these individuals, or Uri has taken these individuals, and and kept them safe and kept them working in an environment where they can be
Mm-hmm.
comfortable. And that's the type of thing as well. On top of growth, are you comfortable? Are you looked after? Do you trust the people that you're working for? These are other factors that are really important,
But I
Bartek.
suppose it's not the thing that you do every day. I mean, the situation that you just mentioned, and what's going on Ukraine. Hopefully, that's we shouldn't get used to it, right? Hopefully, it's just a singular situation that just happened. Um, but what drives you on every day? I mean, what motivates you? I mean, I've met you, and one of the things that you said, and I absolutely fully agree with that. You're a people's guy. I mean, you like people, and you enjoy being around people. And
Yep.
you being in business development, that's a perfect place to be. But is this the main driver for you? I mean, is the job is giving you the opportunity to meet a lot of people, to talk to them, to do something cool with them, to grow together. But is that the main driver for you, or is it something else?
Bartek, I've been asked this question a lot over the years, even when I was a kid. What motivates you? What makes you go and do the things that you do? And I find it really, really difficult to give an
Mhm.
answer to this. I just know that every single task, whether it's a personal or a work or whatever task it may be, even if I'm going to the gym and there's somebody there telling me to do something, I just feel as if I have to embrace it and do it to the best of my ability. I'm like, obviously, I have doubts in my head sometimes about whether I want and the motivation, whether I want to do it or not. But I tend to be able to get over that and get it done in any case. So I know that some people, when they answer this question, they have this like epiphany moment where they say, "Oh, this happened, and as a consequence of that, this is what I'm motivated by." But either I've missed the epiphany moment, or it's just something that comes sort of naturally to me, and I can't really put my finger on it or
Mhm.
understand. I'm trying to be straight with you, but I genuinely don't know what it is that gets me up in the morning and keeps me
Uh-huh.
going. I don't know.
but whatever it is, it is. I mean, it works, right? Yes.
I don't know. You could argue, right? So I come from uh, Ayrshire in the west of Scotland, which is a fairly working
Mhm.
class part of Scotland, and my father was a truck mechanic. And I don't know, maybe I'm motivated to get out of that scenario. Not that it was ever bad. I never ever wanted for anything when I was a kid. But maybe I always wanted to go to university. I was the first person in my family that went to university. But beyond that, wanting to improve my social standing, I'm not entirely sure what it is,
Okay.
Bartek.
Okay. Actually, that's another question I wanted to ask you. You did have the episode in your career when you actually launched your own company. So you were, nowadays lots of people they
Yeah.
pride themselves from being the founders. Whatever the companies they do, that could be super small, that could be like not really important, but the fact that they could put on the business card the word CEO or the founder is like super important for them. Um, and you
Mhm.
got to the point where after being hired by some companies, you opened your own company, and then you came back to work for somebody else.
Yep.
Was it difficult for you?
Okay, I think what's important, just given what we've just spoken about with regards to motivation, I know exactly why I wanted to run my own
Hmm.
business. So there's something that's not on my LinkedIn profile, Bartek, but for a 2 week period at the start of 2006, maybe 3 weeks, I started a recruitment job with a corporate business in Glasgow. I won't name them because they still exist. And but I literally lasted 3 weeks, Bartek. Now, why did I last 3 weeks? I lasted 3 weeks because of them and because of me, because we weren't a match. We genuinely were not a match.
Hmm.
As you said, I'm quite outgoing, I'm quite straightforward. These guys were stuffy, they were very corporate, and we didn't suit each other. And that came to a head, and we decided that it wasn't working. And that's when I ended up meeting David Copeland and going to betting jobs. So that failure in my eyes, in all honesty, if I make a decision and it doesn't work out, I see it as a
Hmm.
failure. I use that to motivate me in order to get to the point 3 years after that, 3 or 4 years after that, in order to launch Red Executive. And that is it important to have CEO um, on the business card? For me, I don't think that was the motivating factor. I think the motivating factor was to get to be able to control something and build something the way that I wanted it to be built. Um,
Hmm.
and I mean, we lasted for 10 years, and I think it went pretty well. It was totally bootstrapped. Sometimes we made money. Sometimes we struggled to make money.
It is how it is. Yeah.
You know, and we had over that period. You know, it's
Yeah.
normal. It's normal, right? Over that period, I think we probably had, I don't know, maybe 80 to 90 people come through the door in terms of employees. At one point, we were 25 people in total. So there was ups and downs, of course there was. But yeah, it was interesting, right? So I have been asked the question. So when you went back to work for somebody else, how did you feel about it? And my answer is, I was always delighted I didn't have to be responsible for a payroll again.
Got it.
You know,
Gotcha.
there are advantages. There are great things about working for yourself and having employees,
Hmm.
etc. There's something amazing about that. But sometimes it's
Of course
pressurized,
it is.
and sometimes, you know, paying people's wages is the most important thing on your agenda. So yeah, when to be honest, I moved to Gig, and Gig was a business that I knew very well because I knew all the founders and the C level there very well. Um, so it wasn't a difficult transition for me in terms of I wasn't going somewhere that I didn't know anybody. Everybody knew who I was. You know, they weren't going to turn around after 3 weeks and say, Martin, you're not working out
Hmm.
here. So it was a sort of natural sort of transition away from running my own business and then working with somebody on the gaming side.
Gotcha, gotcha. So let's focus a little bit on you becoming a manager. I mean, clearly your
Mhm.
story. You weren't trained to be a manager, right? Your dream job after the university wasn't to become a manager on a certain level in the corporate environment. You were man on the ground doing the stuff with your own hands. And then I suppose the reality, especially reality of running your own company, forced you to learn how to manage people and forced you to learn, how to create a team, how to motivate it, how to let somebody go, how to spread the bad news, and all that. Did you take any extra education on that, or did you just learn as you went with it?
So the first thing that I can say, Bartek, is that the over 20 years career that I've sort of had now, I've made more mistakes from a management perspective than I've made in any other area of my career. So that's the first thing. And if anybody tells you otherwise, then I would question the legitimacy of
Hmm.
what they're actually saying because nobody is perfect
Hmm.
at this. And you know the way that I approached leadership or management, which I see as two different things, by the way. Um, but the way that I approached these, particularly when I ran my own business, was that okay, it's my business. I want to build a culture that I would want to work in, that I think I could be successful in. But then you have 8 people sat in front of you, all who are entirely different and motivated by different things. And it's really, really difficult to create something, a platform for them to be successful. I remember one thing I used to say a lot, and I can't believe I said this now looking back, but people would come and say, okay, how do I do this? How do I sell like this? And my answer at the time was, listen, you need to find your own way to
Mhm.
do that. Because I can explain how I do it, okay, which I did, but ultimately you need to find your own way to do it. So basically, what I was saying was, it's not my responsibility; it's yours. And again, on reflection, I can't really believe that I did that. It's a bit embarrassing looking back. I think I can go back into my head then and think I understand what I was thinking, but it was wrong, entirely wrong. Um, so yeah, you need to really adjust. You need to go through a lot of doubt. If you speak to my business partners over the years, people who have been high up in my organisations, sitting down and saying, "Okay, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this issue?" And anybody who's been in recruitment will tell you some of the incidents, some of the issues that arise are, it must be alien to any other industry. It's ridiculous. You get 20 salespeople in a room, and the things that can happen are crazy sometimes. Um, but yeah, and then again, when I moved to, so I went through that period, and probably at the end of Red Executive, I ended up with a team that was very much like me, and that was okay. It was good to go to work every day. Everybody was happy, but were we actually a diversified, successful organisation? Maybe not as much as I would have liked. But then when I went to gig, again, it was a publicly listed business, a little bit more corporate. There was 700 people there from a 20-person business. I sort of took a step back, and they were very much about training at gigs. So they utilise a training group in Malta called Made You, who are excellent. I can highly recommend these guys. They're tremendous when it comes to leadership training. And they did a few surveys, we did a few role plays, etc. And what I realised was is that, I'm not there to fix a situation. I'm there to create a platform, but I'm not there to fix the situation for each of the individuals in
Mhm.
my team. And when I realised that, and I didn't have to pay their payroll, that made a big difference too. Then I realised that actually leading isn't quite as complicated as I thought it was. And considering every single nuance of every single individual that you're going to have reporting to you or in your team really isn't your concern. You just need to be direct, straightforward, create the platform for success, and let them understand again how they're going to progress, what part they're going to play in achieving the goals. And that was a real sort of, we talk about epiphany moments. That was probably an epiphany moment, and from that point forward, I felt much more comfortable as a leader, as a manager, helping people achieve their goals. So that's really how it sort of, that's really the curve, if you like, Bartek. That's how it worked.
Hmm. So, what you one of the last things that you said, I would rephrase it and say it's very important to be able to detach from the parts of the business and give it to somebody else, especially in a big organization, right? Not trying to be a control freak, not trying to micromanage. Even if you see something that it doesn't work in a perfect way, well, it's not your job. I mean,
Mhm.
in a healthy way, of course. But I think I get it. So let's jump into October last year when you joined Soft2Bet, because you clearly got into a pretty big, well-established environment already, with some routines in place, with some habits, with people who've been there way longer than you, and you comes directly into a management position. What was your approach? I mean, did you set everything up in a way you wanted it to be, or did you try to adjust to the way they do it?
That's a good question. So I think it's better to go back before we go forward from
Hmm.
October. Okay, so we go back and we look at the situation with Gig. So I was the sales director there. I was leading a team of 5 or 6 sales guys, a marketing team, and was heavily involved in the strategy behind the platform business within Gig itself. So I think for 4 years I had been involved directly with that, and I was lucky enough to see a lot of good things and a lot of bad things that we did, and I include myself in that. Um, we we made some mistakes for sure. Okay, but if you see when we left or when I left, certainly the business was on an upward curve. The amount of customers that were signing, the types of customers that were coming forward were larger, and the marketing was more succinct with in line with the sales strategy. So there was lots of things that I had sort of learned during that period of do's and don'ts. But these do's and don'ts, as you sort of alluded to, they might not apply to another business. So I had to come in and I had to
Yes.
see within Soft2Bet what's going well, what's going badly, why is it going badly, and I quickly realised that you know what, Soft2Bet's an entirely different culture from Gig. Gig is again a publicly listed business, kind of corporate, not really corporate internally, but for sure externally it's
Mhm.
corporate. Um, but there isn't a, and I put this down to Soft2Bet having a 100% owner in Uri, but Uri is quite. I don't think he's a very motivational individual to work for. Whereas at Gig, if I go to Uri and I say, okay, I've got an opportunity here, he says, follow the opportunity and we'll get it done. Okay. Whereas at Gig, we have an opportunity, it's quite a big one. Then it could be we're looking at all the negative things about why we can't do
Mhm.
it. So the change in the
Mhm.
change in mindset makes a big difference to how you have to approach this.
Mhm.
So I actually took a bit of time. I probably took 3 months in the run up to Christmas, and then realised what we were looking for. So at Soft2Bet, everything was a little bit, let's say, not so process driven. So I knew that we needed somebody to come
Mhm.
in and create that process for us in order to give us a structure in order to be able to do things faster and more successfully. So I brought in Alex Collier to be our commercial ops director. We had three or four additional sales guys to the team that already existed. Um, we hired Irina Barsanescu in order to lead our B2B marketing. Um, Marketing from Soft2Bet perspective has been very sort of PR driven and about the share of voice and the impact that the brand has, which is great and has a really positive impact from a big perspective. But we needed somebody to figure out the synergies between sales and marketing and how we drive the right type of leads from the right type of customers directly to us. So Arena's come in and is doing a great job on that side. Yeah, so I had to understand it, Bartek, in answer to your question before I could put a solution to it. Now, many of the things that I learned from Gig for sure have been implemented, but there was unique problems here, unique challenges to face that we had to figure out there and then. So you don't have a one size fits all to these things, no, in my
Mhm.
opinion.
So right now, after all those months you've been in Soft2Bet, how is it? How is the daily work organized? I mean, for instance, if I may ask, how many people is directly in your team? How big is the team?
So I have six direct reports, and then below them there's probably another 60 odd,
Right. Okay.
give or take.
Are they geographically? Are they? I suppose they are not in Malta, right?
Some are in Malta. I think between the team, I think maybe 20 of them are in Malta that come direct into my remit, and the others are abroad. The sales team for sure are. You see, this is a funny thing, right? So people say, "What's your structure?" Right, and you say it's kind of geographical. So, for example, we have Nico Campano. We had in order to look after LATAM, and again, he's doing a great job. He's doing a great commercial sales driven job. Okay, but Nico also has contacts in Europe.
Hmm.
So the question you need to ask yourself, Bartek, is if I put him over there and I put a tight remit on him, then that means that I'm not taking advantage of the contacts that he has
Hmm.
in Europe. So what we've tried to do is create a situation where there's collaboration between the sales guys rather than
Hmm.
competition, so that they work together in order to actually say, okay, I know this guy, this guy, this guy. Okay, and they say, I know this guy. And when they turn around and it happens, we both know these guys. They'll go and do it together, or they'll say, you take that guy and I'll take that guy. You need collaboration in that situation. And you need to, the thing is with sales, is you'll be aware, Bartek, is we need to get the maximum opportunity from their network. If we're limiting them, then that will never happen. So I believe in a loose structure for
Hmm.
sales guys from a geographical perspective, but it shouldn't be tight. That's the way that
All
I
right,
see
but
it.
whoever you're gonna talk to, they're gonna tell you, collaboration is so important, and it's peace and love everywhere, and everybody's great. I mean, I get it. People are good, but you must have some kind of like control factors or controlling indicators that tell you if the person is doing anything or not. So I'm on your side when it comes to the to it's better to lose some time not controlling somebody's rather than getting into micromanagement and trying to you know uh, have full report on every minute of the day of a person. But how in details do you control it? I mean, knowing that the team is pretty big, knowing the team is like geographically spread all around the world, uh, you can't really talk
Yep.
to everybody. You can't really have the feeling of everybody's emotions and everybody's like attitude. So what's the system that you've put in place that allows you to have some control on it?
So the individuals need to know what success looks
Hmm.
like, Bartek. Because if they don't know what success looks like, then how can they take their individual measures in order to achieve that? So the first thing that I did, in fact, before I started, I wrote the Soft2Bet mantra. So this is basically 10 commandments that indicate specifically what we expect, what our expectation of a Soft2Bet employee is. So there's things in there, simple things like, there's no toxicity, but there's other things that, I find in every business that I go to, no decision will be taken in
Mm.
isolation. Do you know how much or how many issues taking decisions in isolation cause every business on this planet? We don't do it. This is very important for us. The way that we approach the customer with positivity, the way that we take advantage of the opportunity in the industry. So there's these, again, 10 commandments that everybody has to work by. So if we're having a meeting, Bartek, and somebody turns around and says, I'm having a real challenge with this, I don't know how to approach it, I always refer to the Ten Commandments or the
Mhm.
Soft2Bet mantra. So that's the first thing. Okay, so that's very philosophical if you want,
Yeah.
right? It's a philosophical way about how we want our people to behave and do their job. Okay, but that's not empirical. You're absolutely right. So then we need to help our guys understand what success looks like from an empirical perspective, from a numbers perspective. Now, again, I'll challenge anybody who disagrees with this, but you know how successful a salesperson is going to be within the first 3 months, Bartek,
Mhm.
because you know exactly what they're bringing to the table, you know exactly what you're going to continue to get, and you can see just by the desire and the way that they're approaching things, even if they're having challenges, even if they're not making sales, whether they're going to be ultimately be a success or not. Again, I challenge anybody um, to refute that. But yes, they do need some guidance. So they need to understand. We split down our pipe and we split it into 6 or 7 different stages, and we expect the guys to be able to deliver X amount of demos on a monthly basis and be able to take X amount of them into the next stage and then start looking at more detailed proposals for the
Mhm.
customers and more detailed analysis for the customers. So they understand what success looks like. Again, not just from a philosophical perspective and a behavioural perspective, but definitely from a numbers and empirical perspective. I think that basis is really important.
It is. I mean, till that point I get it, but you have a background in sales, I do have a background in sales as well, and I suppose you would agree with me that whenever you as a salesperson who's concentrated on creating a real relationship with the with your wannabe client, and you want to provide a real value, not just do the sale, not just close the contract, then if you put yourself under the
Mhm.
pressure that, hey, I gotta sign the deal till the end of the month because my boss is expecting me to do it, that creates a situation where you can have any values written on the board you want to you want, but still you're gonna be pressured to sign the contract, so you're gonna break all the values, you're gonna break every single rule you have just to deliver because that's what's expected. So the question is, do you as a boss, when it comes to the end of the month and the quarter, or whatever, and you see the numbers don't add up, they don't, it's not what it's supposed to be, but do you have this person saying, you know what,
Mhm.
I don't have the numbers, but I promise you I have a bunch of clients, or soon to be clients, that I really believe I'm gonna be able to onboard, just trust me and give me some more time. Would you do it or would you not?
Yeah, of course, I'd do it once. Absolutely.
Once.
No question. The thing is, I mentioned earlier about learning from past experiences. You're absolutely right. I am actually sure that in the past that I have pushed or been pushed for certain things to be delivered by a certain time, and the value, not just to the customer, but actually to the solution in the business that I'm working for, has been reduced in order to get that deal. And you know what, Bartek? No, I don't believe in that. What I believe in is creating win-win scenarios that work for everybody. So yes, listen, if a sales guy sat there and he's got a deal and he's waiting for a signature, and he says, if we offer a 10% discount, we can get it signed this side of the quarter, it doesn't make that big a difference to me. Leave it until the next side of the quarter and we'll get it signed then. So it's about balance, but there are situations whereby that doesn't work, right? Because it depends how many chances, how long has a salesperson been working with you. You need to see success at some point, and if you have had a consistent flow of conversation, we as a team work very closely together in order to understand opportunities and offer mechanisms and ideas and anecdotes in order to make things work in our favor. Of course we do, right? But it depends on all of these criteria, whether you turn around and say, okay, this is the last chance, or this is, you're not getting a chance, you need to get it done by this point. You need to be very, very careful, Bartek. And each individual situation is different because, if you're talking about a high value deal as well, high value deals do not happen
Mhm.
quickly. You know, people may want it to happen quickly, but it takes time. And if you're talking about hundreds of millions or tens of millions of euros, people aren't going to sign just because it's the end of the quarter. They're going to sign when it's right to get done. So this is another factor that we need to build into
Mhm.
this scenario, if you like, Bartek.
And speaking of high value deals, I suppose the people that are the customers in this kind of situations, they try to, even if they start a conversation with the company through, let's say, a basic salesman, like a standard guy who's there on a trade show, they tend to try to
Mhm.
avoid the guy as quickly as possible and get to somebody from inside of the company, like to talk to somebody in charge. So do you have any processes around that? Like, is it a standardized process that you do, or is it more like you talk to the guy, to the salesperson, and he tells you, well, I have this big fish, probably you want to take over, or you want to introduce him to somebody from inside the company, and you do it case by case basis.
Okay, so there's an ideal scenario and there's a very unideal
Let's
scenario
talk
with this,
about real
Bartek.
life scenario.
Right? So okay, but the ideal scenario is that your sales guy comes to you, says, I've done 80% of the sales
Mhm.
process. I want to bring you in and I need you to hit these messages for me. Okay, and then you understand exactly what he wants you to do, and your sales guy's in control of that
Mhm.
process. So the sales guy has noticed that there's something that he needs done by me or by Uri or by any of the C level. Okay, and they need to be brought in order to deliver a message. Once we've done that, we can go away and he can close the deal. So that's the ideal
Mhm.
scenario. The less than ideal scenario is that maybe you've had maybe you've done 20%, 30% of the process, and somebody comes directly to you and decided that they will only deal with you. Now, that creates two issues. One, as you rightly pointed out at the very start, I'm a bottleneck, Bartek. So, in order to be able to sit down with me and talk to me like you would with a sales guy for maybe 2, 3 hours a day on different things, I don't have that amount of time in order to dedicate to that. I would love to be able to do that, but I simply don't have that time. And then, secondly, I would say that some of the sales guys probably know the product better than I do, Bartek.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I would say that some of the sales guys know what's going on in the market in terms of competition, etc. Maybe a little bit better than I do. So coming to me, I understand, right? You want to deal with the ultimate decision maker, but you know what? It's the way that the sales guys position opportunities to me is ultimately what determines whether it's a yes or a no,
Mm-hmm.
Bartek. So it's there's perceived advantages in it, and maybe building a relationship and having long term might help for sure. But managing the process or wanting somebody in the C level to manage the process, it doesn't work as well as you probably first
Mm-hmm.
envision.
So from what you just said, I can clearly see there's a lot of trust in the people that you hire, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have trust, then what's the point in having them, Bartek? It does, and I suppose this stems back to one of my weaknesses. But I expect people to treat me. I expect to treat people the way that I would want to be treated. So let me get on with it. I'll go and be successful for you. And if I'm not, then it hasn't worked out. See you later. That's the way I want it
Mm-hmm.
to be. And again, that's the way I would want it to be. But again, it's my responsibility to create a platform for them to be
Mm-hmm.
successful. And we work in an ever changing industry with technology. And you know what? It's difficult. It's not easy for sales guys in our industry, Bartek. It really isn't. So I applaud all their efforts and everything that they do on a day to day
Of course it's not.
basis.
Of course it is. Whenever I talk to managers or business owners, I can clearly say that each one of them falls into one of two categories. It's either category of know your people, trust your people, get to understand their struggles and understand the difficulties they have, and trying to support them and believe that they're doing the best they can. And the other category are the people, I would call them data oriented, like data based. So it doesn't really matter if I like you, if I don't like you. It doesn't really matter if I trust you or not. As long as you deliver, you're good. As long as you don't deliver, well, yeah. So typically, what I can see is that people in one group, they kind of, I don't want to say hate, but they kind of despise the people from the other group. like, oh, what do you know? I mean, my way is the only way because and a bunch of reasons here. So, from what you said, I would assume you're in the group of trust people and be a people's guy person rather than data oriented. Do I get it right?
No, I would say I'm a hybrid,
Yeah,
although
nice
you
try.
suggest that doesn't exist. But I think I'm a hybrid. I think, listen, I've always been brought up since I was a small kid to trust people until they give you a reason not to
Hmm.
trust you. Right, so I will always trust somebody, right, and give them the opportunity, assuming that I believe in them in the first place.
Hmm.
Okay, so I mean, as you can probably appreciate, I've done tens of thousands of interviews over the years, so I think I'm fairly good at figuring out whether somebody's going to fit into our business or not. So that's the first thing. If you don't give them trust at that point and you're already all over them and smothering them, then it's never going to work. But again, you can take that data, okay, and you can take that route to success that you understand, and you can give it to these individuals as a platform for success. So I genuinely see me, Bartek, as a bit of a hybrid between both of them because if you speak to, I would believe if you spoke to the majority of the people that I work with, They would say, I'm a good guy, I'm trusting, I enable people to do their job. But they would also say that I'm very direct about performance, about success, about what it takes to get somewhere. So, yeah, I think I'm a bit of a hybrid. I don't know if you've ever seen that before, but yeah, I think I'm a bit in between both.
Uh, Frankly speaking, I haven't. I mean, I believe what you say. Of course, I do. But at the end of the day, there's always, you would always come to the decision that you have a guy that don't deliver, and you want to keep him for some reason, and that means you're a people's guy, or you are not going to keep him, and that means that even though you trust him, even though you believe he tries his best, he's not delivering, right?
Yeah, but I think I would always, I think I am a people person by the fact that I'm direct and straightforward
Hmm.
with people. So if somebody's not performing, they understand from me they're not
Hmm.
performing. And if they get to a point where it's no longer tenable, then they have to leave the business. But that doesn't mean that I'm not being a people person. In fact, that means I'm being more human. Because who wants to stay in a job that they're not
That's right.
performing in? Uh, you know?
Oh well, especially in sales, you have all those arguments that, oh, I'm doing my best, but the market is changing. Whatever worked a year ago, it's not working anymore. I heard it like dozens of times already, right?
Yeah, no, sales guys are a particular breed. That's why you need the numbers to back you up,
Right.
right? But the thing is, Bartek, is that I've worked with all different types of sales guys, right? I've worked with the guys who do very, very little but concentrate on a particular big deal
Hmm.
constantly. I've got the guys who do absolutely everything and deliver 20 deals a quarter, you know? And then you've got the guys in between who are working on big deals and some small deals,
Hmm.
right? But the message that I give to them all, if they're not performing, so if they go through a quarter or a couple of quarters and things haven't quite happened for them, then they simply need to get back to basics. Now, that's less of the case than the individual who's doing so many deals because that's his way, right? But the medium guy and the guy who's only concentrating on one deal a
Hmm.
quarter, they need to get back to basics and they need to look at the numbers. But if they're being successful, then the numbers don't matter so much. But you need to have that basis for success if you're not performing. That's the most important thing.
Right. And I have this rare opportunity to talk to a guy who's running operations. I think it's safe to say globally, because I've seen you. Obviously, I've seen you around the Europe. I mean, Soft2Bet. I've seen around Europe. Recently, I've been to Cape Town, and I've seen
Mhm.
Soft2Bet in Cape Town. I suppose in North America, I would also see you. Is there anything in terms of both managing your team globally and the types of the clients? Are there any like observations that you have that, for instance, clients from this part of the world, they tend to close the deals faster or different way, or they're looking for different things? Are there any like golden rules that you've learned so far?
We operate in, I would split Eastern Europe and Europe into and Western Europe into two because they're
Hmm.
very different. Then you've got North America, including Mexico, and then you have LATAM, including Mexico, because Mexico's a bit of a funny country. They definitely look towards the states, but they definitely feel in their heart that they're Hispanic
Hmm.
in LATAM. So that's a bit of a hybrid situation there. Now, from an employee perspective, um, I would say that certainly the North Americans have a higher expectation than anybody. Now, what do I mean by that? From a signature perspective, from day one, they're expecting everything to be done and be on the ball and good to
Hmm.
go, right? They're paying for it, so their expectation is high. And I'm not saying that expectations aren't high in Western or Eastern Europe or LATAM, but it's extremely
Hmm.
high in
Hmm.
North America. So you need to be prepared, you need to be ready, and you need to be willing to really go that extra mile in order to keep the customer satisfied. Because if you don't, then they won't be. It's that simple. It's a tough
Hmm.
market. Um, from from a internal perspective, sales for me, it doesn't really change. The negotiation points change. So, for example, in LATAM, they don't like upfront cost on minimums. They prefer to pay more on the rev share moving forward. Whereas maybe in Europe and North America, they would prefer to pay upfront in order to reduce the cost in the longer term. So there's those things, but the actual mechanism of sales itself isn't isn't very different. It's just the mechanics of what they negotiate on, essentially. I think for sure, obviously, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, latterly in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, they're more mature, regulated markets. So therefore, the customer expects you to have a stronger understanding of what's going on in their particular market. So that you need to have knowledge there. You need to be able to display that. You need to be a figure of authority on it. In all honesty, Bartek, and that's where I spoke about sales being difficult earlier. Sales is difficult because things are constantly moving. But even the things that are solid, like regulation, they're not easy to understand. And this is when operators come to us and they're asking us for different solutions. Sometimes it's not clear what they're asking, and sometimes it's not clear what they're asking because that what's actually documented from a compliance perspective isn't clear either. So you need people who are into the detail within these markets, Bartek. Um, I know that I've seen a lot of sales tactics within the industry over the years. You know, some people just like to put people out there and have numbers, but every single person we have is a regulatory knowledge and a compliance knowledge that they can apply to things. So I would say that's the case. In terms of management of these individuals, like moving, like in order to create that basis for success, you know, it's, when you have regional teams, Bartek, you pointed it out, you don't have that emotional connection that you have with the individual in the office because you speak to them once on a Zoom call every week, right? So it's not easy, but I still advocate getting everybody together. So, for example, in May, all the sales and account management team came to Malta and we spent some time together. You know, just team building, like, you know, really old school 1970s team building. This is, you know, you go out and you do an activity together and then you go for a nice meal and a few beers. You know, this makes a big difference. That people have been doing it for decades, so why should it change? Um, but yeah, is the biggest challenge having a team that is multi jurisdictional, international, is definitely the team aspect and getting everybody together and having people on the same page. The collaboration that we sort of touched upon
Mhm.
earlier.
And how about the tools? I mean, in terms of managing, like everybody as at the end of the day, that's just one company. Do you have like a central set of tools, knowledge base, tasks management, communicators, and things like that? Is it like all centralized and you just throw it into every single continent and I don't want to say force, but like have everybody working on the same set of tools, or do you localize it? Say, I'm just guessing now. Let's say in Africa, it's not popular to use Teams; it's more popular to use whatever. Would you like switch then?
Okay, so an interesting point to touch upon here is the generational
Mm,
aspect,
mm,
Bartek. Okay, because I'm 44 and I have guys in my team that are mid 20s. All right. And they are, as I call them, they're mobile native. You know, they're
yeah.
mobile native, right? I'm not so mobile. I didn't have a mobile until I was 17 or 18.
Hmm.
But my point being is that the way that these guys communicate sometimes is very different to how I communicate. Um, and you need to find somewhere in between so you can both thrive and understand what on earth is going on. Like people in my team, they love Slack. I'm not a Slack guy. Yes, I'll communicate there, but don't send me War and Peace on Slack because I'm not going to read it.
I feel you.
You
I
know.
feel you.
So yeah, exactly, right. So, interestingly, right. So when I first started, and I mentioned earlier that we started to
Mhm.
implement process. So we are implementing a CRM system called Zoho, which basically creates a flow for sales, a flow for account management, a flow for any communication with the customer. It's a task manager. Marketing can use it. It's a knowledge base. All the documentation can sit there, and we're starting to roll that out across every single team that we have. And I can already see benefits to it. We've stopped using Google Sheets
Hmm.
because if there's 400 Google Sheets that you need to look through to find the one you want,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
working, right? So yeah, we're keeping everything in one place, and for now, for now, we'll keep it standard. But yes, Bartek, interestingly, we may go down a route whereby when we start to regionalise a little bit more, and maybe have, like, for example, we've got an operational team that's growing in Panama. We might start looking at having people down there from a commercial perspective as well. And then their flow might look a little bit different to everybody else's, but ultimately it's of the same basis. But yeah, there's regional nuances that you have to consider for
Hmm.
sure.
Hmm. So, how much do you force in the name of standardization and in the name of introducing the right processes? And how much do you let it flow? I mean, you want to use line communicator in Asia, not Slack? That's fine. Just, you know.
Yeah, so I mean, literally, you could have as many of these as you wanted, but you've got to standardise, right? And whether I like it
Hmm.
or not, it doesn't really make a big difference. Everybody seems to like Slack apart from
Okay.
me, and I'm willing to make that adjustment. That's fine. Again, just don't send me War and Peace. But the point being is that, as it happens, the guys that have been in this team at this stage have been very lucky because they've actually had an opportunity in order to shape this process and this communication and how it works. Now, in a year's time, when we hire people, they might turn around and they're entitled to give their feedback. Of course, they are. It would be stupid of us to hire people and not listen to their
Hmm.
feedback. They might come and say, "In my place, we did it like this. Why don't we do it like this?" And there's always room for adjustment. Of
Hmm.
course, there is, if it makes sense. And this is what you need to do. You need to take other ideas, you need to take other concepts, you need to say, is this particular part of the process, like for example, the commercial
Hmm.
negotiation, the delivery of the contract, these more important aspects, they need to be solidified and standard, whereas the rest can have a little bit of wiggle room one way
Hmm.
or another. But you can only do that with a mature team, Bartek. When you're relatively new, you need to keep things as standard as possible and then start to open it up
Hmm.
a little bit. So these are the key things to consider. And again, the maturity of the team is very important.
Gotcha. All right. We talked a little bit about your clients. We talked a lot about your employees. I mean, internal perspective. Let's talk about players. I mean, again, I have this rare opportunity to talk to the guy who who has his platforms. I mean, it's of course it's customized, but at the end of the day, it's pretty the same piece of software all around the world. Do you see any major differences in how players behave? I mean, in terms of player acquisition, player retention, are there any major differences that you could point out between Africa, West Europe, North America, South America, like anything in particular?
Okay, so you mentioned
Hmm.
acquisition, you mentioned conversion, and then you mentioned
Yeah,
retention,
yeah.
essentially. Okay, so you're looking at now, yes, there are absolutely different aspects to consider in each of these markets. So, for example, in North America, unfortunately, in my opinion, but driven by the fact that there's only six iCasino states, the majority of the states are competing on the basis of bonusing and promotions. So they will acquire a customer through a crazy welcome bonus. To give you an example, when I was in New Jersey a few weeks back, Fangio had when you come out the Lincoln Tunnel on the New Jersey side, they had a big billboard. It must have been about, I don't know, 50 by 40 feet easily. It was massive. And this stated, if you deposit $5, we'll give you
Hmm.
$150. Now, you've never seen anything like that in Europe in your entire life, but the entire market out there, because they're all vying, particularly the big three, so FanDuel, DraftKings, and MGM, because they're vying for market share rather than being profitable, they're doing things in order to acquire, convert, and then even retain their own customers. So there's no long term value there. It's a race to the bottom, in my opinion. So yeah. Whereas in Africa, okay, obviously the spend is much less in the majority of markets. I can't think of an outlier that has a ridiculous a European based spend. There's none of them that have that, but it's very sports betting first and very accumulator focused. So they do parlays, and if they and it's very they come from a lottery background, so they're not just putting three or four teams in an accumulator. They might be putting 9, 10, 11, 12. And if one of those fail, then they want to be able to do another accumulator. So these are the types of things that you need to build into your retention focus. And fair enough, given the margin that you're making from that and giving them another free 12 times accumulator, I don't think it's too risky as the operator. So that's the expectation there. Europe, again, more mature market, um, very competitive market, and it depends upon the actual and you've got so many different nuances. Like in Sweden, for example, like you can only give a welcome bonus in order to be able to retain a customer, even from an ROI perspective. It can be difficult. Germany, I mean, the operators in Germany are really struggling because they're all competing across the board for €1,000 a month from each customer that can afford that. So that when they talk about growing their business, they're actually talking about growing the share of the overall player wallet across all of the operators. So there's a lot of challenges depending on the market, Bartek. And then obviously in Asia, it's very much about ensuring that you have the right content and the right information at the right place at the right time. So it's it, every market is different, and I know that you've sort of put it on a continent basis, but actually it's even more granular than that. Like if you look at a really good example for that is probably Czech Republic, where Synot and Kayot, if you don't have those two local content providers, then you're going to struggle to resonate. So you need to think about all these things. Payment solutions. If you don't have the right payment solutions, then you're not going to work either. So there's big challenges in every market in order to be able to firstly acquire, then convert and retain. The convert part's the most important from my perspective. The other two can be adjusted in order to improve, but you need to get that conversion element right from the beginning. There needs to be as less friction as possible in order to get them on the other side of the deposit.
All right. So, because what I'm trying to get here is to get an advice to let's say casino operators, whatever the operators, who's I've seen the ideas that hey, I'm based here in whatever Texas, Poland, Germany, whatever. I'm gonna set up the platform in anywhere in LATAM. I'm gonna obtain the license. I'm gonna hire just a guy for some marketing, and that's it, and I'm done. And from what you say, it's not that easy, right? It's not just about getting the payment operator, and it's not about getting the license. It's all about like really understanding the local market. And so the question is, you obviously have the opportunity to see very successful and not so successful operators. So is there any like
Yes.
advice how to build your structures if you want to become global player? I mean, maybe not global, but like more than one country and more than one continent type of the player. Like, what's the strategy that typically works, and what's the strategy that you see often that never works?
Okay. So first of all, before you even decide whether you're going to go into a market or not, you need to understand whether your existing platform is capable of it. So I've even seen some platform providers or some operators with their own platform go into markets, and the key aspects that you need in that market aren't even capable on that platform. So you need to look at your platform first. Is your platform capable of delivering not just the regulatory framework, which is important, but also the features that would be required to be successful in this market? Like, for example, I mentioned in Africa about the types of bonuses that you need to deliver. Does your bonus engine allow you to do that? If it doesn't, then you're going to struggle. So the product is the first thing, even prior to launching into the market. Right. Secondly, what are your competition doing? So what is the competition doing in order to be successful? So when they talk about acquisition, what type of campaigns are they doing? is this market an above the line or a below the line market? Is it a combination of both? Where's the majority of traffic coming from? Are we going to have to pay more than the competition in order to get this traffic? There's a big analysis that needs to be done in order to understand that. What games are big from a casino perspective in this market? Do we have them integrated? How much do they cost? Can we create a margin there? There's so many different aspects. And then latterly, you talk about the marketing guy. So, okay, put together a marketing plan and manage that. But a country manager, I see as a commercial profile rather than a marketing guy. Because what you should have is you should have individuals across each channel concentrating on that market, and then he works with them in order to hold them accountable and make it localized. So if you're not going through this entire process to localize and make sure that your product, your marketing, and everything that you're doing is ready for the market, then you're going to fail. Because it's not like 2008 when you go into a market, go up with 5 affiliates and be making 2 million a month. It doesn't work like that anymore.
All right. And the things you said were mostly do's and the typical don'ts that you see.
Yes. Don'ts. Okay, so don'ts are interesting. Don't think you've localized. Think you've localized for a market and then still have English banners on your site. Do you know how often I see this, Bartek? It's crazy,
All
right?
right.
Certainly don't do that. Get a local to do your translation because you know what? Even well, you mentioned Latam, and people say, "Oh, they speak Spanish there," but there's probably 8 different types of Spanish. So if you're going to localize, use the right version of Spanish. Little small nuances. Don't have English people answering or English speakers answering your customer support. Have local people doing it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Don't use AI bots in a new market until you've already established your customer
Thank you. You said
base.
it.
This
Thank you.
is, you're laughing at it, but I've seen it. I've seen it. Genuinely. Don't create a complicated registration process in any market. Try to optimize as much as you can against the regulations for sure. But there's so many of these things. Make sure if you go into the North American market that you have a sportsbook that can offer US odds. Genuinely, I've seen people launch with decimal. It's
Seriously.
Yep,
All right. All
yep.
right.
So there's some don'ts for you. There's some
All
don'ts
right,
for
all
you.
right, gotcha. All right. So just to sum up, we haven't really talked about Soft2Bet as a company and your plans for the 2025 because let's face it, Soft2Bet is such a big player that most of the small players are looking up to Soft2Bet and like waiting for what they're gonna do, what is the next big thing, so that we could get ready for it. So, is there any what are the plans for 2025 for Soft2Bet?
Okay, so we will definitely continue to increase our regulated
Mhm.
footprint. So we're in or about to be in 12 regulated markets, and I would imagine we'll add another 4 or 5 in 2025, taking us up to 16, 17. So that's definitely on our agenda. It could be organic, it could be acquired. We're looking at both, in all honesty, Bartek. So that's the first thing. The second thing, we'll continue to push Mega. So if anybody's sick of hearing about Mega, you're going to continue to hear about it because we genuinely believe in regulated markets. It can drive a better ROI for large operators. It just for those who don't know, Mega is our motivational engineering gaming application. And essentially, what we've done is we've taken large aspects of casual gaming, social gaming, computer games, and applied it within a casino environment, whereby if you spin, okay, or you bet on sports, then you would go to a narrative, um, that matches your audience, and there's a gamified experience. So it's either an achievement or a journey or a challenge, and once you've done that, you actually get returned back to the casino itself in order to spin there. So it creates a loop And we've seen massive increase in terms of screen time, engagement, and all the major KPIs that you can expect. We believe in regulated. If you're struggling, like to make the ROI that you want, this can help you achieve that. So we will continue to push that for sure. And then you may have seen as well, I suppose number three is we just launched and are going to start speaking to people in IGB Amsterdam about Soft2Bet Invest. So we've created a fund, 50 million euros. We're looking for investments between 500 and a million euros, probably sort of Series A, maybe a bit earlier, but predominantly Series A. And what we want to do is find synergies with smaller businesses, with smaller entrepreneurs, whereby they can utilize our liquidity and they can actually start to take their business on a steeper trajectory and become and take it in the direction that they want to. So yeah, we're pushing all three of these things. That's three of many, Bartek. I could go on about this forever, but I think those are the three key
Mhm.
aspects that we should be looking at in 2025.
Knowing who's our audience, mostly those are founders and small and mid-sized companies. Would you elaborate about the last part? I mean, what kind of companies are you like looking for to invest in? Um, is there any particular market, type of the service, type of
Okay,
the product?
okay. So we see it as it's very we're looking for tech businesses. Okay, we're looking for tech businesses within the industry that think that they can actually make a material difference to the potential business of an operator. So the way that we see it, Bartek, is that there's a cycle between innovation and consolidation. So we're going through a heavy period of consolidation at the moment, and we have been for the last couple of years, in all honesty, maybe even longer. And what we believe is that out of consolidation always comes a period of innovation. And I think we're already seeing it because I think you can see a lot of people in the AI space. You can see a lot of people in analytics. You can see a lot of new businesses coming out of, and generally, rather than from younger people who are just getting involved in the industry, it's coming from people that have been there and done it, and they're going back to the start again, right? So we want to work with these guys. We want to understand, like, so we've highlighted like traffic, we've highlighted AI, behavioral analytics, any sort of software development that is new to the market out there, from a sportsbook perspective, from a casino perspective, from a platform perspective. We see and we continue to see a lot of advancement in these areas. So we want to take early stage, we want to put money into them, and we want to help them grow. And like I said, unlike your traditional investor, we actually have some liquidity that we can
Mhm.
utilize in order to really advance the product, get feedback quickly, and take it in the direction it needs to go in.
All right, all right, all right. Thank you for the conversation, ladies and gentlemen. That was Martin Collins from Soft2Bet. Thank you for your time.
So thank you, Bartek. I appreciate it.